Now, on BBC Two, we build a picture of everyday life in the 14th century in the History File.
Adoptable trees are fundamental.
Time passes. People's lives change. Famine, war, plague, rebellion, all leave their mark. Even the landscape bears the scars of forgotten generations. The mounds in this field were houses. Hollows in the grass were roads. Broken pieces of squared stone once cornered rooms. All evidence of a once thriving village, Warham Percy. One of 3,000 deserted medieval village sites in Britain. But who lived here? And how did their lives change through time?
William Jordan is accused of bad ploughing of the Lord's land.
Fined sixpence.
Henry Tucker refused to thresh the lady's corn.
Fined fourpence.
John Jost let Peter, a stranger, stay at his house without permission.
Fined tenpence.
Villeins, the peasants of medieval England, could neither read nor write. They leave no written record. But from the evidence that does survive, a picture of their life emerges. How they lived, tied to the soil, how their lives and labor were bound in service to the lord of the manor.
For you see, in England it is custom for the nobility to have great power over the common people, that they are bound by law and custom to plough the fields of their masters, harvest the corn, gather it into barns, thresh and winnow the grain.
In Warham Percy, the local lords were the rich and powerful Percy family. So what might life have been like as Lord Percy's villein?
This morning I mixed barley flour with pig's blood and made a fine pudding. And I tell you true, right this moment, we want for nowt.
Now, Tosh, we want for coin to give my lord that I might not work his fields.
We make ends meet.
We must pay to be married, pay to be buried, pay for being at court, pay for not being at court, pay to visit market, pay to sell our ale, pay to grind corn. Only thing we don't pay for's breathing.
We've got our own land.
Not enough to feed us when times are rough.
Enough for our children to marry well.
Not enough for our sons to share.
By the grace of God and help of our friends and neighbours, we will survive.
Archaeologists began excavating Warham Percy in the 1950s. They uncovered a manor house and 30 peasant houses, all much alike. Their researches have enabled reconstructions to be built. These were flimsy structures. Just 2 rooms with floors of earth, roofs of thatch, walls of wattle and daub. Animals lived alongside humans. But whether these were homes or hovels, opinions differ.
Like prisoners in dungeons are the poor folk in cottages. They're burdened by their children and their lordship's rent. You see them brewing porridge for a screaming babby, or spinning for a twopence that's too soon spent. The woe of those in hovels dwelling makes me weep so in the telling.
It's true, we have little. Yet 'tis not my way to moan and play the mincing grumbler. I know contentment, sitting with my children, or trading quips with neighbours, for we have a roof over our heads. And though the animals smell and the peat smoke from the fire is very clogging, for we have no chimney, yet we have a roof over our heads. And I will work very hard to keep our house clean. I will sweep the hearth daily and throw the embers on fields, or mix it in pig's swill, for pigs know the value of a full belly. They'll not turn their noses up and play all high and mighty.
Clues found by archaeologists at Warham Percy support much of what she says. Life may have been difficult, but people were determined to keep up appearances.
We found the dirt floors had been worn down from constant sweeping. And we found household rubbish out in the fields, so they obviously tried to keep things clean. And though they can't have had many luxuries, we did find keys and door locks, suggesting they owned possessions they cared about. Also needles, thimbles, scissors, spindle whorls for spinning, and various types of household pottery.
I would sit as a noble woman does all day with embroidery and gad about without caring world. That would be grand. But I have no time. The vegetables and chickens I must deal with, and spinning and selling ale I brew. It will be better when children be old enough to help us. Mary, she's 4 now. Already she's fetching water and scaring birds. When I'm alongside Robert in the fields, we lie babbies nearby where we can hear 'em. And I'll wrap an ember of coal in their swaddling clothes to keep 'em warm. And sometimes the coal burns right through and there's an awful yelping and the poor thing's burnt as a boiled capon. Oh, there are good times.
Beyond the houses at Warham Percy lie the fields. In medieval times, these fields were subdivided into strips. Each villager would work a number of strips scattered across the village lands. Life was paced by the seasons.
January,
By this fire I warm my hands.
February,
With my spade I dig my lands.
March,
The time for romancing,
and April.
when the songbirds sing.
Spring's time for planting. My lord's fields first, of course, and then our own. Oats, barley, peas, beans. It's done all across village at once. So come autumn, we can harvest all crops together. But first is ploughing. Hate ploughing. Up to your ankles in mud. Cold, cutting through your coat like it's made of cheese. My 4 effers straining at plough, so feeble and thin, you could count every rib.
In May,
I'm light as bird in tree.
in June,
I watch my corn grow free.
July,
My meadow I must mow.
and August.
Shear that corn full low.
A good harvest will keep famine from door for a full year, but it's hard work. All but sick and lame out in fields, children and all. You cut grain, gather it, pile it high on wagons, you need a ladder to reach top. And if that don't kill you, watch out for that cart as it lumbers its way back across field. We have to use Lord's mill to grind corn for flour. He takes his cut of everything. If I could buy my freedom. But he's not a bad man. Free cup at harvest supper.
September,
Flail to earn my bread.
October,
See the trees turn red.
November,
Time to kill my swine.
December.
Christmas, sloshed on wine.
We can't afford to keep animals for dairy. We butcher them, salt them, smoke them. But you have to make them last. Winter can be rough. Last year, lousy harvest, skinny animals. I had to go poaching, rabbit and game. And once I were by mill pond and I spied this fish. Tench it was, so bonny and bright. And I lay down on that bank, and just with me hands, easy as pie, I caught that tench and carried it off.
So the seasons and the years went by. People accepted their lot and made the best of it. Change seemed a long way off. Certainly no one expected the dramas just waiting around the corner.
We see death coming amongst us like black smoke. Woe is me, the shilling in the armpit. It is seething, terrible, an ugly eruption which comes with burning haste.
The Welsh poet Ewan Gethin, writing in 1349, describing the arrival of the Black Death, bubonic plague. Between 1348 and 1350, this disease killed off somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population of Britain.
The sickness fell upon all classes. The rich passed out of this world without a single person to comfort them. The poor fell sick by the 1,000. The terror was such that brother fled from brother, wife from husband. Yea, worse still, parents refused even to nurse their sick children.
It travels, they say, in bad air, a cloud of mist destroying the land it passes o'er. We'd heard rumours long before it reached this far north, but just last week, Patrick at Carter, he was first. He'd been in York, told us terrible stories of bodies lying in streets. And now it seems he's marked out too. Swellings, big as eggs, big as apples, in his groin and armpits. And then boils spreading in all directions and black spots on his arms and thighs. There are some in the village that want him burnt, truly, though he's not yet dead.
The cause of disease was a mystery. In fact, it was spread by rats. Their polluted blood was drunk by fleas, and the fleas passed the disease on to humans. The plague spread so quickly that at its height there weren't enough living to bury the dead.
When someone dies, all who see him in his sickness or do business with him or even carry him to his grave quickly follow him there. There is no known means of protection.
I must catch myself a toad.
You what?
A toad. If you put a dried toad on plague sore, it draws venom forth. Just wait a while and it swells up with poison. Must have one handy in case.
Oh, I don't think so. It's a curse from God, that's what it is. You can't shift a curse by puffing up some poor toad. You have to ask yourself why we're cursed.
Gambling. What could be? I swear to God I'll throw me dice in Myra will.
I think it would be better to pray, Robert. I think it would be better to seek confession. I will go tomorrow to priest. Why do you laugh?
Priest died. 5th this year. Oh, God.
So what effect did the plague have on everyday life?
People stayed indoors, ignored their neighbors. Sometimes whole families died at home and no one noticed till the smell of the rotting bodies filled the street.
Prices dropped. No one cared about money anymore. Everything was cheap. And sheep and cattle just wandered over the fields with no one to tend them.
In the village of Rue in Wales, two brothers, Maddock and Kenrick, exploited the plague by stealing 3 oxen and 3 cows from the house of Almar.
Cities fell into ruin. Villages became desolate, with no houses left in them. You couldn't find a labourer for love nor money.
And then my husband died. When first swelling appeared, he would not let me near. And when I would approach, he left the house, stumbled away. I never saw him again. I sat and waited my turn, but death never came. My brother is yet alive, and 2 of my children. We feel somehow blessed, though we know not why we have been chosen. That village is very quiet. Half the people we knew, dead. And my Lord Percy, dead. There are some who say now we will flourish. All this land and no people. You can buy a horse for 6 shillings that were once worth 40. We could lease some land cheap. Do all right.
The plague created a shortage of workers. This gave those that survived an advantage. They could insist on higher pay. To protect the landowners, the government passed laws to try to keep wages down.
Workers are idle and not willing to work without outrageous wages. Therefore, we insist that these servants work for wages as low as they were in 1347, before the Great Plague.
But the workers wouldn't listen, and the landowners could do little. If they didn't meet the laborers' demands, their crops were left rotting in the fields with no one to harvest them. Over the next 30 years, wages stayed high, prices stayed low. With times so good, how much did people's lives change?
You get as much for herding cows as a master bailiff used to get in your dad's time.
Yes, Mother.
We had beans and rough corn. Now it's all meat and wheaten bread and cheese and milk. And our clothes were hodden grey, coarse and undyed. Look at you.
Well, times pass. I'd be no man's slave. I will ask a good price because I am a good man. And you're a good woman, Mother. You should not put yourself down and stoop like some dull skivvy. Well, stand up. Yeah, that's right. You owe service to no one. We have bought our freedom. And never forget, in eyes of God, we are equal to King.
There's little record before the late 14th century suggesting people thought like this. But in the boom years that followed the plague, workers' hopes and confidence had soared. There are accounts of rabble-rousing priests preaching out against the old order, stirring up protest.
My friends, England will never be well until we lose this distinction between nobleman and villein. For we are all one. Why are those whom we call lords master over us? Is it not by the sweat of our brows that they keep their position? Why should they dress in velvet? Why should they have good food and grand houses whilst we face the pain of working in the fields in the wind and rain?
In the year 1380, King Richard II demanded the payment of a poll tax, 12 pence per head. There was no nationally organized reaction, but throughout 1381, there was violence all over the country.
In Frobbing in Essex, a crowd killed the tax collectors and went from village to village, burning down the homes of them that would not join them.
In Berners Berwick, the rebels stole their lord's timber, firewood, hay, and they drove their cattle onto his land.
In West Mersey, tenants withheld their rents and services.
In Felixstowe, all the court records were destroyed.
All over country, risings against local lord and priests. It's no greater loathing than for church, wanting tithes year upon year. It's been killings, looting. Oh, it's not a rabble. It's townsfolk, traders, folks with land. Cambridge, records burnt. Salisbury, armed blooming rebellion. Oh, and London, London's peach. Archbishop of Canterbury, no less. Do you mind, your grace, placing your head upon this block? Thump! And meanwhile, us Yorkshire boys flattened most of city walls and maked at Storm Castle.
Stephen, son of Alice, it is said you came to York in a warlike manner and did assault John de Blacktoft, a skinner, and caused many others grave injury. Have you anything to say?
Just, that king is traitor to people. He made promise to set people free and he broke his blooming word and... that's all.
You do not deny the charges against you. I have no alternative but to find you guilty and sentence you to be hanged.
The peasants' revolt failed. Rebels were rounded up and executed the length and breadth of the country. The last record we have of life in Wharram Percy dates from 1517, over 100 years later. A court case, a landlord determined to evict some cottagers. No more villeins, but how much had things really changed?
A programme guide to Historyphile Medieval Realms is available by ringing 081 746 1111.